Hello, YouTube divers. This is Water 122, and I want to welcome you all to another episode of the podcast for high school sports all across Western North Carolina. Now, today we've got a great show now that the football season is done with and basketball season is starting to kick into gear. You're going to see me do a lot of basketball news throughout the course of this series. And you will also maybe touch on a couple of football news here and there, and things like that. And today we are going to be counting down my personal and emphasis on personal, my top 5 personal biggest disappointments in the 2021 high school fall season. Now, I already did a list like this in the spring for the spring season. You could go check that out if you want to. But I decided to bring it back here again because, why the frick not? Now, this list was extremely hard to put together because in order for me to do this list, I had, for one thing, to see how much of a downgrade the teams that are on this list, how bad their performances were compared to the spring season. And also just, from overall, just put a lot of frowns on their fans' face. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So number 5. Now, before I get into my number 5 pick, I just want to clarify that I don't mean any disrespect. I'm not trying to hate on any of these players, regardless of how badly their team played. How badly their team performed this season. This is not a hate video whatsoever. I'm just expressing my own personal thoughts. And because, that's what analysts do these days, or, whatever the heck you want to call it. So I'm not trying to hate on these people. They're great athletes. They're great kids. No doubt they're talented. And if I see any hate comments about these athletes, then I will delete your comment and I will block you from commenting. So just a little FYI on that. And again, no disrespect to any of the athletes who played on the teams that are on this list. This is just my own personal thoughts. This is just what I have seen, and it's all that in a bag of chips, if you call it that way. So, my number 5 pick, this was probably the hardest entry I had to put on here, because I was extremely hesitant about putting this team on this list. And that is my very own, I love him to death, my Brevard Blue Devils. Yes, I'm so sorry, Blue Devil Nation. I really did not want to put you guys on this list. I really didn't. Because, as I wouldn't even say that Brevard was bad this season. Inconsistent is a great word to describe this season for the Blue Devils. They were just horribly inconsistent in my books. Now, yeah, obviously they didn't have a lot of stuff going right for them. I know they had to, cancel or postpone several games due to, COVID issues. And, some games we had in the bag, we just couldn't finish them. So we really should not have been a 3-win team. We should have been a 5 or 6-win team in my books. If, we had beaten teams like Asheville, Irwin, RS Central, Polk County, schools like that. We were very close to winning those 4 games, but we couldn't pull it out of the bag, which is very, very disappointing in my books. And I know it's frustrating on the team, and I know it's frustrating on the coaches, I know it's frustrating on the fans, myself included. But it is what it is. And like I said a couple months ago when I was talking about how I thought that Brevard was going to do this season, I thought that, given the fact that this was mainly the same team that went 4-3, in the spring season, I thought that this team, with more experience and a lot of talent, could make a deep run. And after we upset Robbinsville in the first game of the season for us, I thought that was going to happen. But it didn't. Sadly, it didn't. After the Robbinsville game, Brevard just completely fell off. Well, I mean, really, it was after we lost to Asheville. I mean, after the loss to Asheville, Brevard just completely fell down. I mean, yes, we did get some dominating wins down the road, like against East Henderson and against Patton. But, when you look at games like those smackdowns we had against Chase and the smackdown we had against Hendersonville, that was just brutal. Honestly, after the Hendersonville game, I felt like a lot of Brevard fans just wanted this season to end. And, with a 32-team bracket, it definitely looked like that it wasn't going to end for us. But we barely missed out on the playoffs by just one spot, which is also extremely disappointing in of its own self, but, it is what it is. So, I love Brevard. I love the Blue Devils. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to diss on this team. I still love these guys. And no doubt that I think that they'll get better over time. But this was just a season to forget. Moving on. Number 4 is the North Henderson Knights. Now, this was a more relaxed pick for me because North Henderson was actually coming off a decent season in the spring. And how do they rebound? By not doing much better. I mean, like with Brevard, they were rapidly inconsistent. You give up 79 points against Hendersonville, which is a really good team, by the way. And you give up, and then you win your next 3 games, and then you lose, and then you only win one more game throughout the rest of your season. Like, what is going on? I mean, now credit where credit is due. North Henderson actually did make the playoffs, but they ended up getting blown out by Dudley by a score of 60-0. Again, not really a competition there. But, North Henderson had expectations, and in my opinion, they were not fulfilled. And so, yeah, not really much else I can say about North Henderson at this point. Number 3 is RS Central, the RS Central Hilltoppers. Now, like with North Henderson, RS actually was coming off a really good season last season. They went all the way to the Rutherford County Championship against Chase, which was one of the best games of the spring, the entire spring season, might I add. And then you follow it up with a 2-6 season. And you have a Division I recruit in Xavier Toms, who is one of the best running backs I have ever seen in high school sports. No doubt that RS Central had the talent. Like with Brevard, they had a ton of talent, like quarterback Jaden Costin, the aforementioned Xavier Toms. I mean, Ken Hines, for example, a nice running back duo who literally ran all over Brevard when I went to that game. Like, I'm not even going to talk about it. That's a video for another day. But overall, the point I'm trying to get here, RS Central had a ton of talent, and you went from a 4-3 season to a 2-6 season. Most of those losses, from what I remember, were either shootouts or blowouts. It was never in between. If it was in between, then RS Central would have won, and they only won 2 games against Brevard and against Patton. Sadly, though, in my opinion, RS Central just wasted those players' senior years because those were their senior years, and now Xavier Toms is off to NC State, rather, and who knows where the other 2 guys that I mentioned are going, but who knows, but regardless, RS Central had expectations. In my opinion, they were not fulfilled. I mean, against Brevard they were, but not for the entire season. Now we got number 2. Number 2 is the Tc Robertson Rams. Oh boy, where do I begin with this catastrophe of a season? Am I right? Now credit where credit is due. Tc Robertson had a solid season last year, and that yes, they did lose a lot of talent from the spring. From the team that they had in the spring. But still with that comes expectations. You're expecting these young guys to, you had a year to learn and and gain experience from people that were a higher class than you, and then you would take that. And I know it's not easy to do. Don't get me wrong. I know it's not easy to do. But with that comes expectations. The fans want to see something that is great. And you went from, if I remember correctly, a 6 or 7 win season from a year ago to a 2-6 record, or to a 2-9 record, or whatever their record was. Point is that they won only 2 games. Yeah, this was a forgettable season over in Skyland, but I think at this point, Tc Robertson fans, especially considering that the spring season was like one of the only relevant seasons that they've had in like the past 4 or 5 years or something like that. 2019 was also a pretty good season for TCR, but 2018 and especially this year were not really that great. So yeah, Tc Robertson here, number 2. They could have been number 1, but I can't really fault them too much since they did lose a lot of their playmakers from last year's team. So I'm not going to punish them too much, but they're still here, number 2. Number 1 now. I'm not even going to list some honorable mentions because honestly, this list was already tough to rank at its own expense. Number 1 is the North Buncombe Blackhawks. Now, this team was a massive disappointment for me. North Buncombe, since 2018, they were coming off. Now credit where credit is due. They used to be awful, and then 2017, they were. I think they were fine, and then 2018 they started to turn a corner, and then 2019 started to turn a corner. Spring season started to turn a corner, and then it all comes crashing down on earth here in the spring. They did not look good, to put it as nicely as I possibly can. They just did not look good. The highlights that I have seen, the film that I've watched, it was just brutal. It was brutal. And my deepest respects go out to the fans who had to watch this, and all the players, the coaches of North Buncombe High School, and all these schools that are on this list, as I've stated in the beginning of the video. But overall, 0-8. You don't win a single game, and you had teams like Madison, who, into their own selves, wasn't really good coming into the game. Pardon me. You had a game against Inca, which was very winnable. Didn't win that game. You had a lot. You had Tc Robertson, who was on a downward spiral during the season. Couldn't get it done there. It was just not a great season for North Buncombe. For the folks in Weaverville, it was just, it was, in my opinion, the biggest disappointment of the 2021 NCHSAA Western North Carolina high school football season, and it tops this list. So, yeah. So with that said, that concludes this list. In my next episode, I will be talking about the Shelby-Reedsville playoff matchup from this past weekend. I will be breaking down that game for you guys. So with that said, again, deepest respects to the players, coaches, organizers, everyone. The schools, everything that had involvement with the teams that are on this list. nothing but respect and the best of luck and wishes next season. So with that said, that concludes this edition of the podcast for high school sports all across Western North Carolina. Thank you so much for watching, my fellow YouTube divers. This is WaterLab122 signing out, ready to dive into more fun on YouTube. Thanks for watching.